Do you think he paid a price for admitting that he had an addiction challenge?
I think in hindsight, yes, it did, but I feel like it motivated a lot of other athletes because, a lot of men, especially professional athletes at that level, it's hard to open up, because of the stigma, because they don't want to be judged. And then somebody like Brett Favre, somebody who's well known, who's a quarterback, who won a couple Super Bowls, it's like, it's in a way motivating to hear him talk about some of the things that he was dealing with.
We move the change. You hear what I'm saying? Real players can relate because they the ones that was playing. Be great. Just wait. We be really in the field. Now we really on the mic, speaking truly how we feel. For real, screaming hut one, hut two. Tell me what you got.
Welcome back, everybody, to Move the Chains. I'm your host, Matt Baker, and for this latest episode, we're going to discuss a very important issue, yet it's an initiative that we at the Lions are very proud to be a part of. Back in January, hop into the time machine, we launched the plans to partner with the government of BC and the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions for the Stop Overdose campaign. We encourage everyone to check out stopoverdosebc.ca, and bclions.com. We have our own Stop Overdose website. First off, we want to thank our sponsors, Doman Building Materials and RBC, Royal Bank of Canada, of course. And as mentioned, this is a subject that is very important to everyone in this province, currently at the forefront of a lot of news reports, and I'm sure we'll get into this at some point. Last couple of years, the whole COVID-19 situation has made it come to light even more. The BC's coroner report was released last month, and there were 2,224 deaths in 2021 due to the toxic drug crisis. And on our call today, we have a very special guest, Minister Sheila Malcolmson, joining us with the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions to tell us more about what is contributing to this crisis and what our provincial government is going to do to respond. Minister, great for you to join us. How are you today?
I'm really glad to be sitting down with you to talk about this really heartbreakingly sad story and what we can do together to try to make a change.
Yeah, and we're going to get into it right away here after we introduce our other guests. We have Jamie Terrace, the Lions Director of Community Partnerships. I think I got that title right, Jamie. I know
that's correct, Matt.
There's some of that lingo, some of that language has changed over the years, but you've been a great constant here with the club. Great career as a player, and now doing great work as the club's community leader, community ambassador. And this is one of those many programs that you've done a great job with. Rick Campbell, Lions head coach, co-general manager, other titles not named. Coach, thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
And last but certainly not least, the pride of Abbotsford, BC, the 2021 CFL Most Outstanding Canadian, Bo Lokombo, is with us. Bo, how are you, sir?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
Yeah, great. And I think our first chance to talk to you in interview form since the Player Awards in Hamilton, and that was no doubt a big night for the organization. But again, we're here talking about the toxic drug crisis, Stop Overdose, and again, stopoverdosebc.ca. Outside of this podcast, a great tool for anyone to read up on it. Minister, we'll start with you. Could you provide a bit of a background on the public health emergency and what's changed since this was first declared in 2016?
Yeah. BC was hit early and hard by what has hit the rest of the continent, just increasing toxicity and unpredictability in the illicit street drug supply. And so 2016, there was a public health emergency declared in British Columbia about what then we were calling the overdose crisis. And now we're really calling it more a toxic drug crisis. And we've been hearing from people that maybe had a sustainable heroin use, say, for 20, 25 years. They've been taken by just getting into something much stronger, more toxic. something that suppresses breathing, people dying of an overdose of what used to be a drug that they could handle. Things have gotten so much worse, though, since the pandemic. In 2019, we had started to see overdose deaths drop, and that carried into the first 2 months of 2020 last year, 2 years ago, gone. But pandemic measures, it's now really broadly recognized, led to a lot more drug toxicity as the border closed and people started manufacturing more their own illicit drugs, such that right before the pandemic, the people that were dying of overdose, the coroner found they had 4 to 8% fentanyl contamination. Now, last month of 2021, between 24 and 28% fentanyl contamination. And then there's other drugs as well, benzodiazepines that suppress breathing and don't respond to naloxone. So even though as a government, we've been throwing in more treatment, more prescribed safe supply, more overdose prevention sites, more public education, really trying to combat that stigma to say, please, people don't use alone. It's dangerous. Buddy up, connect with healthcare. We can connect you with treatment and safer ways to use drugs to try to keep people alive in this crisis. People's mental health has gotten worse. People are more isolated. And the drugs are more toxic, which is right now just tragically outpacing our addition of new support. So we're still fighting as hard as we can. We're still adding new treatment beds, new healthcare interventions, more harm reduction interventions almost every week. Never been so much added into healthcare to try to make things better. But conversations like this really make a difference because we need to lift the lid on addictions. We need to have people not be frightened and ashamed to talk about it. So that gives them the first opportunity to get connected with care. And this is a real point of leadership that we really are counting on. So hands raised to BC Lions for being part of that really difficult conversation.
Yeah, I think I know me personally, I know people who have, had addictions and been impacted by the fentanyl crisis like you've talked about. And and that's one of the many reasons we're happy to be partnering. Before I go around the Zoom call here, so to speak, and talk about everyone's specific role with this project, I started with this football club in 2016. I wasn't really aware at all of your ministry, mental health and addictions. How much more of an impact have you made overall these last few years? I know you personally were elected in 2020, I believe, correct? But how much more work has your ministry done with this crisis just over the course of the last couple of years compared to before that, say?
Yeah. Well, when the NDP and Premier Horgan took government in 2017, one of the things that the Premier did was to create this ministry. There hadn't ever been one in Canada anywhere before. And it was my predecessor, Judy Darcy, that was the first minister. So the intention, the way the Premier talks about it, is just to have someone who just wakes up every day saying, this is the single thing that I'm focused on. And I'm especially grateful for that. If this was all under the health ministry, can you imagine Adrian Dix doing COVID and overdose response? So, honestly, the service delivery still happens through the healthcare system. Every health authority, every part of the province, including First Nations Health Authority, they're the ones that are delivering the services and also reflecting back to me, like this is what the North needs, or this is what the Island needs, because they're different, geographic responses. And then we're doing really cool things like partnering with, we can maybe talk about that a little bit more, construction industry and different ways that we can kind of have get a foot in the door of talking to different sectors. Because again, this isn't one size fits all, but it's my job to create the plan, implement the plan, advocate for the budget, administer the budget, but it's still health authorities and the frontline service groups, paramedics, fire, like all the same people that are attending to other healthcare challenges. They're also helping us with mental health and addictions. And my focus, my job is just to have that singular direction, kind of an area of specialty. And who knows, maybe 5-10 years down the road, we won't need a specialized ministry. It'll just be completely embedded into our healthcare response. That's what we're aiming for. We're not trying to create new silos. But we've got a lot of ground to make up because there wasn't a system of mental health and addictions care in 2017. So we're building it while we're fighting two public health emergencies. So hands raised to the folks on the front line. We're asking a lot of them, and they're just working under incredible pressure, for which, we're grateful every day, have to be.
Indeed, very well said. Jamie, what can you talk about in terms of the importance of this partnership with our football club and how we are involved? I know we're going to talk about what Coach and Bo have done specifically, but what can you say from where you sit?
Sure. Well, when we first heard about the new ministry being established in 2017 and understanding we had a great history with the provincial government of different programs like Be More Than a Bystander, where we talked about gender-based violence that we were involved with, and really looking at this, and like you said, Matt, this being a huge surprise for us in our province to understand that people's lives are being affected and people were dying because of this. We wanted to lend our voice to this cause. Really, ultimately, we wanted to be a part of the solution, and we felt that in our minds, one of our platforms has always been helping to build better communities here in our province, not just to play great football, but to be a part of the community and to be part of building better communities. And what better way than to lend our voice to a cause as important as this one? And so the way that we're doing that really is promotion and awareness. So we do it through our social media, through our website, at our games as well, so that our fans know about the issues and the challenges and how they can get involved. And then in particular, with our ambassadors, so like Coach Campbell and Bo. So having ambassadors that are alumni, that have that voice that our fans will listen to is very important. So, we started out with Lou Lay and G. Roy Simon initially, and now we've got the new batch of ambassadors for 2022, which includes Coach Campbell and Bo.
Yeah, on that front, you guys have both recorded video PSAs. I guess, Coach, will start with you. Making the video and the importance of the topics you spoke about in that video and the experience of being involved in a project like this, what made you want to be involved?
I think the thing, the eye openers for me was just the awareness. I was aware of the issue, but the more you dive into it and understand the big challenge of it, you really understand the scope of the problem and know that resources need to be put into it to help the cause. So obviously I did a very minor part, but Vancouver's my home. I'm proud of living around here, and you want it to be the best it can be for everyone. So that part of the awareness of it, and then I think also just the stigma part of it for me is addiction and drug use and stuff. We need to have a little more compassion and understanding, and I just think getting to those steps of starting the conversation like we are today, I think that's where we can do some things to help. So I know just for me as an individual, it's just been hugely valuable because I've learned a lot more. I knew some, but I didn't know it all, and so I want to make a point for myself as an individual just to educate myself and then learn how I can help out.
Bo, how about yourself?
Yeah, so I spoke on how it's important not to assume what we think addiction looks like, because it could be anyone, right? A family member, a coworker, maybe even a CEO of a big company. I know how important it is to reach out, to let that person know that you care and that they're not alone. And I touched on the importance of language. I think the language we use has a direct and deep impact on people. By changing the words we use to talk about drug use, that reduces the stigma, right? So, using kind words can make it easier for someone to speak up, to feel understood, or to receive help. It's important to make yourself approachable. And it might not always be an easy conversation to have, but just by making yourself available, using language that shows care and concern rather than judgment, that goes a long way. So for me, it was a great experience. It's still a learning experience. I'm learning a lot through this. We know that stigma around addiction makes it harder to reach out for help. And people who use drugs, especially those struggling with addiction, face barriers to getting help. And that's why I wanted to get involved, because I want to be a part of that group that ends the stigma. This experience, it gave me more insight and on the severity of the drug crisis here in BC.
Well said. Minister, you've spoken a bit about some of these statistics that are out there, and I've heard that men are overrepresented in the drug poisoning crisis. How true is that, and can you speak to that a little bit?
It's 70% of the people that have died have been male. That's just stunning to me. And honestly, we don't know for sure why that is. But, it may be like following on what Bo said, that kind of shame or, embarrassment about reaching out for help and say, maybe you're worried, you got a challenge. Maybe it's harder for men to ask for help. We also know, from what we've heard, a lot of it can come from workplace injuries, and that's why partnering with the Construction Association has been so important. So now we started on Vancouver Island, but now BC-wide, working with the Construction Association, employers are now bringing into the morning safety talk on job sites conversations about safe drug use and pain management and mental health. And it's called the Tailgate Toolkit. And it's a really cool site. If anybody wants to poke in there, it's kind of designed for and by men, which is so important. And I think we also hear, just again, one at a time, talking to families that have lost loved ones, sometimes starts with a sports injury, so that's really where I'm so encouraged that groups like BC Lions step up. Like how, what is that boundary around, self-care and learning your limitations, and then getting really good support on pain management, because some people have turned to street drugs if they are living in chronic pain, and then things can move to such a bad place. So a lot of this intersects. But, another thing I'll say is, starting to be the majority of people that lose their lives to the toxic drug crisis are people that used alone and at home. So I think sometimes our stereotype is this is about street entrenched people, but I hear from my own firefighters back in Nanaimo, like more often than they can count. They get called to a 911 call, and it's the guy that, the rest of his family went up to bed, and instead of just having another beer and watching the end of the game, he used some other substance. Breathing was suppressed, went unconscious. There was nobody there to help him out, no one there to phone 911 until his body was found, and the families just invariably say they had no idea. So it's just so much more dangerous what's out there, so much more important. If people do have a challenge with addiction, we want them talking to their friends, even if they're not ready to step into treatment, or even if getting connected with prescribed safe supply, which is what we're pushing out through our healthcare system. It can be using a tool like the Lifeguard app, where if you're going to use drugs alone, you download this app, it can alert 911 if you don't respond within a certain time. Like, these are all, we're just trying so many different ways to keep people alive at this really dangerous time. And a lot of those first interventions are about having these really challenging conversations about what people are up against. And at the same time, trying to get upstream and prevent this from ever building to that kind of crisis at all.
Yeah, that was kind of the one thing doing a little bit of research on this. You're kind of surprised to hear more of those examples, like at home, like you said. Jamie, is there, I will kind of go around the room again here. Jamie, is there anything you want to add to that, what the minister just said, as far as seeking help and that very serious issue?
Yeah, and I think for sure the whole statistic around the majority of the deaths are men. I think, realizing sometimes we're socialized as men to put up a front, or to put on the mask, or to be strong, or to deal with our own issues internally and to problem solve, and not to ask for help. I think it's funny, sometimes, I'll have a conversation with my wife after going out and hanging out with my friends, and she'll say, well, do you talk to them about this and their daughter and this and that, and and talk about all these things I really didn't even know about and that we didn't touch on at all, because we're the way that we communicate. When I say we, my friends, it's very surface level, and we don't necessarily get into those deep conversations. And I think part of that is because we want to we want to pretend that everything is all right. And I think so it's really important, I think, as men, that we realize that if we are struggling, if we have an issue, that we do have to share it with someone that we care about and someone we trust, because otherwise, we are going to be alone and we're going to feel more isolated and we're not going to get the help we need. So I think from that perspective, that's one thing that really stuck with me, because I think that's something, when I say as men, and I realize it's a generalization, it's not something that I'm particularly good at in terms of sharing those deep feelings and conversations. So it's something we have to be better at.
I guess, Coach, we'll start with you or go to you here. I mean, we deal with injuries and reports every day, when the team's practicing and playing. I mean, what do you do as a coach and as a staff as far as educating your players on how to best deal with these physical ailments?
Yeah, I just think the mental health aspect is so important. And I think giving people a safe space to talk about what's going on in their lives and the issues that they're facing. And like Jamie said, a lot of men have been raised to toughen out and suck it up and deal with it on your own. And like Bo mentioned about, you just never know who it is or who needs that help. And I think being in an environment where there's outlets or resources that people can access to, where it's a safe space for them to share about what's going on and the problems that are going on. I just think that's really important.
And Bo, you've dealt with injuries. Your brother Nelson suffered a season-ending injury before he even played it down last season, right? Kind of a freak incident there. I mean, how hard is it to deal with it? And from that perspective, kind of expanding on what the others have said here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sorry about that. It's tough, as football players, you hear those words that Coach mentioned, like suck it up and tough it out. Sometimes that tells men not to ask for help, the way it comes off, and it forces men to bury their emotions. And, being a football player, you have to be able to practice through considerable amounts of pain and injuries, and you have to suck it up, because if not, you risk losing your position, playing time, and ultimately your job. The pressure from peers in society and what it means to be a man can be overwhelming, unfortunately. And some men deal with these challenges on their own. Sometimes they turn to the substance, and that's the only way to get by. And it shouldn't be that way. A perfect example I could think of is Brett Favre back when he was playing for the Packers. Yeah, in 1994, he and this is out there in public, but he got addicted to Vicodin. It started with a separated shoulder. It was a pretty substantial injury against the Eagles. And he started with 2 Vicodins a day, and he enjoyed the effect of the pills, and it turned into 4, turned into 6, turned into 8. And eventually he started to take 16 Vicodins a day. So I feel like the support is important. I think creating accessible tools to help men develop effective coping skills has a huge potential to counter the negative effects of cultural attitudes towards men. Encouraging men to reach out to people around them for support is another way to show men are not alone and can lower the impact of pain and overuse of substances. So when I was talking to my brother, I encouraged him. I made sure I was there for him, and I made sure that he didn't go through that rabbit hole of wanting to try something, because it's important to have somebody for him to talk to and to encourage him, to motivate him. So yeah, I feel like having a strong support system is very crucial.
Hey, Bo, can I ask a question? Like when Brent made that admission publicly, that was a big deal. And as kind of a good example of using your voice and your platform. But do you remember what that felt like to you at the time? And do you think he paid a price for admitting that he had an addiction challenge?
I think in hindsight, yes, it did. But I feel like it motivated a lot of other athletes, because a lot of men, especially professional athletes at that level, it's hard to open up, because of the stigma, because they don't want to be judged. And then somebody like Brett Favre, somebody who's well known, who's a quarterback, who's won a couple Super Bowls. It's like it's in a way motivating to hear him talk about some of the things that he was dealing with and the injuries that he was dealing with. I think that even myself, when I was at Oregon, I was dealing with the injury, and I was kind of starting to go that route of starting to drink more and starting to use substances, unfortunately, because of what I was going through. And I realized that it was just a bad deal for me, and I knew it was going to end up in the wrong way. But I had a strong enough support system. My family, I would talk to my family, I would talk to my brothers, and they kept encouraging me. And so I feel like having a support system like that is very crucial, especially for men, because men have a hard time expressing themselves already naturally. They don't want to show weakness. And especially as a football player, you don't want to show any weakness.
Yeah, that was around the time. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think when you have someone of Brett Favre's status speaking out, it does give other people the courage to speak out as well, because they recognize that, even someone as awesome as Brett Favre struggles and has challenges and has to deal with them. And if he can speak about them, then maybe I can speak about my problems as well.
I was just going to say that, yeah, I think he was the NFL MVP at that time, or around that time. This is the MVP of the league dealing with this. So no doubt when someone of that stature comes out and, admits he was taking, I think, a month worth of painkillers, then naturally that is going to encourage others to come forward and deal with the problem. And it's a good segue into talking a bit more of that stigma. I mean, Minister, this, you see this a lot. A lot of people are afraid to seek help for fear of being judged, ridiculed, whatever you want to describe it. What does your organization do to help address this stigma?
Yeah. We're trying to hit this from so many different angles. One of the things we're doing is we've applied to the federal government for decriminalization of people who use drugs. So this is not like what Prime Minister Trudeau did with marijuana. This is not legalization, but it's saying someone who's in possession of a small amount of illicit street drugs, we don't want them to hide their addiction and use drugs alone because they're afraid of getting a criminal record or impacts on employment. We want police to focus on the drug dealers, and we want to say we're decriminalizing personal possession of illicit drugs as a way to more clearly assert this is a healthcare problem and not an issue for the prisons and for police. We want police focused on true crime. So there's one. Programs like this, really important, just normalizing, having conversations about it. It's like any other, a physical injury, a psychic injury. We just need to talk about this as a healthcare challenge and have a player be able to go to a coach or a patient go to a doctor and say, I think I'm in over my head here and I need some more tools. Can you help me? Or to your parents. And if you admitted that to your family and you got met with scolding and shame and thinking this is a moral problem, then that just makes the addiction and the drug use go underground again. And especially at this time, it's so dangerous to do that. And then, like lots of kind of online media stuff and storytelling too. Like we had this great, I was just so honored to meet this guy here in Victoria named Trevor Botkin. He works with Hero Work in Victoria. He talked about working in construction industry, 25 years, keeping his energy going with some kind of substances and really being in over his head and thinking he was going to lose his job if he talked about it. And he found a way to get support, have a supportive family, admit that he needed more help. And now he's someone that is, kind of like we're doing here, talking within his sector about how important it is to overcome that shame, that stereotype about who is a drug user or who is someone that might fall to overdose, and what we can do to navigate into those healthcare supports that we're building up. But if people are too embarrassed to ask for help, then we won't get them into those treatment clinics or into the safe consumption sites. So healthcare has to be paired with that, kind of myth busting about what addiction is and that we all need and deserve help in a dignified way.
Jamie and the fellas, how much did you guys realize how the criminal aspect of illegal drugs contributed to this stigma? And did any of you perhaps have any comments or questions for the minister building off that?
Well, I think it's really interesting. Obviously, I think it makes a lot of sense that if it was a criminal activity, people would be embarrassed about it and would be afraid of being judged about it. So I think that decriminalization could do an awful lot to change the whole perspective of stigma and drug use. And I think, of course, the police need to go after those dealing illicit drugs and threatening our kids with drug use and those sort of things. I think that's very important. It's not the same. Supporting someone is not the same as condoning, I guess, the drug use in some ways, right? I think if that's the way to say it, it's saying I'm here for you. We all have challenges. We all have things we're going through, and but we won't know about your challenges if you're afraid to tell us because of the embarrassment and the judgment that you think you're going to get. So I think that decriminalizing will have a huge impact on that aspect of stigma.
I have a question about decriminalization to Minister Sheila. If I have a friend who, for example, has a substance and he gets caught by the police, are you saying that he wouldn't necessarily end up in jail?
Yeah. So, I mean, this needs the federal government to say yes, and we don't have approval yet from them, but we worked on this actually with police and with people in healthcare and, all through the system. It was really broad in a way that we heard a lot of voices to build our application. So in what we're proposing, if the police find someone that has got a certain number of grams of illegal street drugs on them, but they say this is just for myself or for me and my boyfriend, then the police make that determination based on the volume and not just what it looks like. Then it's like, okay, this is personal use. What I'm going to do instead is give you some information about where you can get healthcare supports to be able to connect with treatment or safer use, and see you on your way. But if there's evidence of dealing, the person's got small bills or the drugs are in lots of little bags, or the police see a hand-to-hand handoff, then that's drug dealing. And it doesn't matter how much the amount is. So, this was led in some ways by police. They advocated for it across Canada because they see that the current approach isn't working. And I know that had a big impact on Premier Horgan. I think that's partly why he asked me to do this work, is that police said, we need to do this differently. So they still make that judgment call based on what the activity is. But yeah, that's right. So if your friend got stopped by police with that amount, then they would get given some information about healthcare. They would not be arrested or interrogated on that.
Interesting, because I was just wondering, because when I went to school at Oregon, and I had a teammate and he was super talented. Like, this kid was super athletic. He made the NFL, but he had issues. And I remember one time he got caught by the police in Oregon, and they arrested him. But the next day, when he talked to our coach at the time, he was so, like, the way they went about dealing with that situation, it made him relapse and continue to deal with those substances. And I'm like, looking back, I'm wondering if it was dealt a little bit differently, because I feel like just what happened from that situation was like a domino effect. It continued. And this kid was so talented and he was such a good kid, but unfortunately, his drug problem caught up to him. And I'm just wondering if it was another way to deal with that situation at the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we would have wanted, is to, in that situation, he gets met with healthcare support rather than a criminal penalty or the embarrassment. And, Oregon's moved on since that time. And British Columbia is trying to as well. And we're really hoping that we're going to get a yes from the feds. But, in a way, really, like, the big message that I would just want to give to anybody is Substance use and addiction and mental health, these are healthcare challenges. They're not moral issues. They're not police issues in our province's mind. And honestly, the way that a lot of the police in British Columbia are carrying out this work already anyway, there aren't a lot of places where people are small time are getting charged. So it's kind of de facto in some ways, but that's not broadly understood. So I get it. Like, you're a young kid who gets found with drugs and your parents find out, in some communities, some families, that is going to be like deep punishment. And instead of oh my goodness, we have a problem, we need to get you to the primary care center, urgent primary care center, or family doctor, or the student counselor within the school, we need to have some good conversations about what is at the root of the pain, or the trauma, or the mental illness, or the social anxiety, like all the things you think of. People might have a few too many drinks at a party because they're just, not comfortable in themselves. The same kind of thing can happen with these really dangerous drugs. And we want there to be a healthcare response, not embarrassment. And lots of tools at that Stop Overdose website that we've set up and that you're helping us promote, just to really encourage those family conversations, those friendly conversations. And if friends even just say, to someone that they're worried about, hey, can we talk about this? Do you need some help? Rather than shaming them about their substance use, to say, I'm worried about you, I love you, and I want to see if there's some help we can help direct you to. And know that we're building up that help support system, but we need to remove the embarrassment about people accessing it.
Yeah, because Minister, it's not just the embarrassment for the person who is caught, or who is struggling with the challenge around drugs, but it's also the family, right? That whole stigma around the family and the network and everything else. You think about it where, if someone is sick and people come over and are helping out, right? They're bringing you food, they're saying, what can I do? But that's not really the case, I would say, when it comes to an issue with drugs, where that stigma not only affects that individual, but it also affects the family, because people are kind of standoffish. They don't want to talk about it because of that embarrassment factor, I think, right?
Yeah, these are very important and complex issues, and we definitely appreciate all the detail going into this conversation on Move the Chains. Before we are finished, though, we want to talk a bit more about some of the positive things that are going on with this initiative, specifically reflecting more on what the BC Lions can do and what we can do to help tackle this problem. Coach, anything else on your mind as far as anything else we as an organization are proud to do?
Yeah, I mean, just even this conversation for me listening in is helpful. And like I said, I think it comes down to awareness of understanding the issue and understanding these topics that we just talked about. I think talking about stuff, getting it out in the open is so key. I was actually a healthcare studies teacher in high school way back in the day, and I remember talking about drugs and things and all that. And I just think of like we've talked about, is not stigmatizing it, not shoving it away, is to have it be out in the open and to talk about it. I just think is so important.
Jamie?
Well, I mean, I think I think it's been very illuminating for me as well. I come from that era where, it was kind of like, you have to be responsible for your own actions, and it's your choice to use drugs, and so you have the consequences. You have to deal with those consequences. I mean, that's kind of the mindset that I came through. So even having to look at my own mindset and to re-examine the way that I think and the way that I approach this issue, I think has been very, very illuminating. And so, thanks so much today for the conversation. And we're very proud as an organization to continue this conversation and to lend our voice to such a very important topic so that we can help to create change in our province.
Bo, anything else you can think of as you continue to be involved with this project?
No, I'm just, really appreciative to be a part of this, because I know, I'm a young guy. I'm still active, and I have a lot of teammates who are going through these kind of things, and they come to me and they ask me, you know, how to handle it. And I feel like now that I know what's going on, I can have a serious conversation with them and, you know, lead them in the right way. And I feel like that's really important, conversation. And we've mentioned it many times, being able to talk, being able to listen and come with the place with no judgment is really important. And, you know, I know better now. I feel like I can educate my you know, even my mom, you know, even my siblings and my teammates. You know, it's really important for me. And like I said, I'm really appreciated to be a part of this.
And Jamie, I wanted to ask you one more. I mean, you're a big part of the alumni, and you've keep in touch with a lot of those great former players, and I'm sure you keep in touch with some of the current players that are retiring, and that's something you hear. Some people have difficulty transitioning post-football and figuring out what they're going to do. You know, how much have you been a resource to some of these other folks who have struggled finding a second career? Because that's a real issue in some cases, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is. Like, you feel like your whole network and your whole social support system disappears, not because people don't like you anymore. It's just because you're not on the team anymore. So that is very challenging for mental health, and it has created issues where players have had to reach out to try and fill the void, right? To feel the pain, to get rid of the pain that they're experiencing. And I think so it is a problem. And certainly I've had lots of conversations, and I am available to any of my friends and colleagues and former teammates that want to have that conversation, because it is real. And, you know, even for myself, it was very challenging when I left after playing for 16 years to just all of a sudden lose that connection, because, you know, you're not with those guys. So that, you know, understanding that every player to some degree goes through that. And that's something that it's important we talk about.
You know, connection is so key. It's a word I hear a lot. And there's a group of mothers in British Columbia who lost kids, especially sons, to the toxic drug crisis. And some of them talk like what you said, Jamie, you know, kind of in the olden days, not really so long ago, there was this real tough love approach to addiction. And, you know, especially young men were in trouble. And I've heard some of these mothers say, that's what I did. And it was the worst thing I could have done, because it pushed, you know, this one woman lost 2 sons to overdose. And she says, I pushed them away with tough love. And what they needed was connection. And that's what addiction needs, is connection more than anything else. So you've got a tribe like built right in, you know, through your club and through the fraternity. And I just really salute you guys for using that voice, because it is life-saving. It really is, that connection and that love that you show each other. And especially after this really tough couple of years where people are disconnected and, you know, it's and under a lot of pressure. So this is really good connection. I'm so glad to speak with you all today.
And I guess the last one for you, Minister, what are the next steps for the province? What's to come here?
You know, we're still working every day to build up that system of care. You know, almost every week we've got new announcements, adding more detox beds, adding new supports in between detox and treatment. We added a couple hundred treatment beds last year. We've got a couple hundred more to come. Talked to some young men in Nanaimo who are in some new publicly funded addiction treatment beds we opened up. And one of them's like, I'm going home for Christmas for the first time in 4 years. And my mom's so proud of me. And, you know, in light of like terrible loss of life, like British Columbia is losing 6 people a day to the toxic drug crisis. And at the same time, there are some people that are getting connected with healthcare supports and moving on, you know, in a way that, like, who knows what was the spark of that conversation. So for me, it's just like always trying to keep that hope that we know more supports are being added. Prescribed safe supply as a way to keep people separated from the toxic drug supply. And then all the stigma beating work, whether it's decrim or whether it's the tailgate toolbox or whether it's kind of myth busting conversations like this. And you never know where, you know, the next chat with a friend or someone who's under pressure, where it might go. So that's what we're just going to keep moving forward and keep trying to hit this with as many different tools as we can.
And we appreciate you taking time. I know it's been busy. I know you came here right from meetings with the legislature. So we certainly appreciate you taking the time. StopOverdoseBC.ca. And again, at bclions.com, we have our own webpage dedicated to some of the initiatives. And you'll see the PSAs from Rick Campbell, Lokombo. Very well done. Jamie Terrace, very much involved here as well. Any final thoughts from anyone in the group? Feel free.
No, just thank you, Minister, for taking the time to talk to us. And it's a good conversation for me, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bo, and thanks, Coach Campbell, for being ambassadors. And looking forward to Matt. The PSAs aren't quite ready, but they will probably be out in the next couple of weeks. But there is information.
Yes.
Yeah, there is information on the webpage that people can look at now.
That's what we call a tease in the broadcast.
That's right.
Jamie, right? Yes. This has been Move the Chains. As always, thanks to our great sponsors, Doman Building Materials and RBC. And great conversation. And for those listening that are impacted by this, know someone, just know that you're not alone. There's always help to be had. And we look forward to talking to you again down the road on Move the Chains.
What up, RP? Let's turn it up one time. You did. We move the chains. You hear what I'm saying? Real players can relate, cause they the ones that was playing. Be great. Just wait. We be really in the field. Now we really on the mic, speaking truly how we feel. For real, screaming hut one, hut two. Tell me what you gon' do. Coming off that edge, only way to stop is hold you. Never let the gatekeepers control you. Once you lose your voice, now they definitely know they own you. But not I. Rob Phillips coming so fly. Pick 6 on the way. When that ball's in the sky, they say time is money, and I wonder why. Now I know that's a goddamn lie. Let's go. Come and get game from the chains. Everybody love it when you move the chains. Haters hate to see me really do my thing. Move the chains, move the chains. Let's go. The chains. The #1 podcast. Move the chains. Do my thing. Getting this dough, you know how it go. Grab a seat and tune in, then tell me what you know. Back when TIP said, get it on the floor. RP was on BC, putting on a show. For show, screaming touchdown, touchdown. Everything you want now. Fans be the chain gang, game every month now. Don't even try to front now. These new dudes be something like my son now. I'm better than ever. The game that we speak gotta be clever. Ball hard no matter the weather. I cheese for the picks while I'm counting this cheddar. On my mama, boy, I never will let her. But so you know I gotta get up and run. Just come and get game from the chains. Everybody love it when you move the chains. Haters hate to see me really do my thing. Move the chains, move the chains. Let's go. Move the chains. The #1 podcast. Move the chains. Do my thing. Come and get game from the chains. Everybody love it when you move the chains. Haters hate to see me really do my thing. Move the chains, move the chains. Let's go. Move the chains. The #1 podcast. Move the chains. Do my thing.